When I was a chef, there was one service every year that I used to dread: Valentine's night. Why? It was all tables of two. There were often people that kind of didn't want to be there, and it was just kind of weird vibes. More often than not, it's a set menu because the restaurant can't handle doing a la carte for 100 tables of two that all want to sit at the same time. So the experience you get is never as good as it can be. In my opinion, it's much better and a far more romantic gesture to cook the food yourself. So today I'm going to run you through a really lovely 3-course meal you can cook for your significant other, and it's all about making sure we're ready before the night so we don't spend the whole night in the kitchen and can actually enjoy each other's company. Let's get stuck in. So main course, we're gonna do a gnocchi dish. Before that, we're gonna make some lovely whipped ricotta with some roast peaches, some toasted hazelnuts, and we're gonna make some focaccia. Then, like I say, I'm gonna do a pan-fried gnocchi with a duck ragu and some pecorino cheese. And finally, we're gonna do an apple tart tatin with vanilla ice cream. The reason I've chosen this menu is because a lot of the prep we can get done ahead of time. So I've got 6 russet potatoes here. I've just poked them with a fork about 5 or 6 times each. A little bit of oil on each one. Olive oil, that is. And to be honest, the olive oil is actually just there so that the salt sticks to it. You really want the potatoes all the same size. Mine are a little bit different, but you don't want to cut them. You want to keep them whole. Season with salt. Then into a 180-degree oven for about an hour, hour and a half until they're completely fork tender, but I'll show you what we're looking for. So the duck ragu, we can make this the day before. You can make it 3 days before if you really want. I've got 4 duck legs here. Just gonna season them well with salt. Then we're gonna get them into a pan with a little bit of olive oil. I'm gonna start rendering the fat out and get some color on them. So now the duck legs are in there in that cold pan, just coming up to temperature, and the reason we put it into a cold pan is so that the fat renders out slowly. We're gonna finely dice 1 onion, 1 carrot, 1 stick of celery. And we're just gonna take 3 cloves of garlic. We're gonna smash them, peel them, and then finely chop them. So back to our duck, we should have some lovely color now. This is what we're looking for. Fat rendering out, nice golden skin. We're gonna flip it over and just seal the other side. So it's been about 30 seconds and these are ready to come out. So they're obviously not cooked. We'll just pull them out, and then we're gonna get our sofrito in there. So leave those to the side. We're gonna add our carrots and onion, a little pinch of salt. I'm gonna saute those until they're softened. You don't want heaps of color though. Now we're gonna add the celery, garlic, about a tablespoon tomato puree, about 100 mils of white wine. Small piece of rosemary, not too big because the rosemary is strong, it'll overpower, and a bay leaf. We add our duck back to the pot. We've got some chicken stock, just enough to cover the duck. Doesn't need to be completely covered. Give it a little jostle around. Bring it to a simmer. Give it 1 more little pinch of salt. Lid on, temperature down low. I'm gonna keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't catch on the bottom. Probably gonna take about an hour 20, an hour 30 minutes to cook. Low and slow. So the idea of getting everything ready ahead of time means you can do this whenever you want. If you've got an hour free on Wednesday, you can get some stuff done. Thursday, you can get some stuff done. So Friday, you're good to go. So the starter, we're doing whipped ricotta, which is a super simple recipe. Whipping cheese, whipping ricotta, whipped burrata. It's like really like in at the moment. And it's kind of this funny thing where you're just making cheese. You're just seasoning like basic farmhouse cheeses and making them smooth. I like it, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of taken over menus. Some lemon zest, a pinch of salt, and some good olive oil. Just add a little bit at a time. You can always add more. You kind of want to emulsify the olive oil in, so if you put too much in at once, you get the chance of it splitting. Just scrape down your sides. While you're there, check for seasoning. Need more salt. And this is what we're looking for. Lovely, smooth ricotta that's seasoned nicely. Into an airtight container in the fridge, and it will last in there for 3 days, no problem. Hazelnuts, super simple. Buy the peeled ones. You can peel them yourself, but it's a pain. Onto a tray, into the oven, 180 degrees, about 8 to 10 minutes, nice golden color. We're gonna let those cool completely, just leave them there. While they're cooling, let's start making our apple tart tatin. We're gonna get the apples done, then tomorrow all we're gonna need to do is bake it. It's a really simple dessert. There's a few key things to get it right. First of all, we're gonna take 6 Granny Smith apples. We're gonna peel them, core them, and cut them into 1/8. Then I just got some water here. Squeeze in half a lemon and add your pieces to that so they don't go brown. So that's actually only 4 apples, but I reckon that's more than enough. So I'm gonna put these 2 back. So this is the dish we're gonna do it in. We're not gonna cook the apples in it at the moment. We're gonna do some caramel and do them in a separate pan. But I think this is a great size for 2 people because half of that is more than enough for dessert. We've got a large pan here. I'm gonna turn that on to sort of a medium heat. 150 grams of sugar. And then about 60 mils of water. I'm gonna pour the water around the outside, and that's because we don't want any of the sugar like that there to crystallize. We're making a caramel here, surprisingly, and you can take this as dark as you want it. I like it pretty dark. I like it. We're going to serve this with vanilla ice cream, so I think you kind of want a little bit of bitterness to come through. Should take about 8 to 10 minutes before we add the apples and cook them. So at this point in the caramel, you got to watch this thing like a hawk. It'll go from delicious golden caramel to a burnt disaster in literal seconds. It's also very hot and will give you 3rd-degree burns, so be careful. I also suggest maybe using a stainless steel pan instead of a carbon steel pan because it's kind of hard to see what color it is. So you see here, this is what we want, this color, all the way around. So I'm going to move this a bit because it's clearly a bit hotter in that part of the pan. Give it a shake. You don't really want to stir this though. If you stir it, sometimes it will crystallize, which is what we don't want. When you see the bubbles start to disappear like this, it's usually a good sign that it's getting close as well. So in anticipation, I'm going to go drain my apples off. We are close, very close. I do want to take it a little bit darker. All right, I think I'm happy with that color. So the heat's still on. We're going to really carefully add our apples. I'm going to turn the heat right down now. We're going to add the butter. What we're trying to do is coat all the apples evenly in caramel. We also want that butter to emulsify into the caramel. So keep mixing them, turn the heat back up if you need to. So see how the caramel's like solidified onto my tongs here? It's kind of what we don't want to happen onto any of the apple. We want like an even caramel sauce all the way over. We're also not too stressed about completely cooking the apples at this point, because like I was saying, we're going to finish cooking this in the oven with the pastry on top just before we serve. Once all the butter has emulsified, you don't want to boil it too much longer. You do run the risk of it splitting. So I've got my dish that I'm going to be serving, well not serving, but cooking my tarte tatin in. I'm going to turn the heat off. So you also want to control the temperature of this pan. You don't want this pan getting cold. If it does, the caramel will set. So really carefully start taking your apples. And you can be as particular or as rough as you want to be with this. You could just honestly throw them all in here and it would be fine. Take the time, make a nice pattern. Now traditionally there's only usually 1 layer, but I like to double it up because I like lots of apple. And the second layer doesn't matter so much about the pattern because you're not going to see it. Then we need to pour all this caramel on here very carefully. So we're going to let that cool completely to room temperature. Then we'll just cover it in some cling film, leave it in the fridge tomorrow. Before we cook it, we'll pull it out about an hour before we bake it. Put our puff pastry on the top in the oven while you're eating your main course. Delicious. So it's been about an hour and a half, and I will emphasize this will take different amounts of time for different potatoes, different ovens. So you're looking between an hour and even up to an hour and 45. And you can tell they're cooked because I can put a skewer straight through them. No stress. There's a real fine window of when you want to make the cooked potatoes into gnocchi. You don't want it to be cold. You also don't want it to be hot, mainly because it's just annoying to deal with. So first thing, we're going to take our spuds. They're still hot, so I like to put them into a tea towel and just cut them in half and then let them sit there to steam a bit. After that, you're going to scoop out all the flesh and place them into a ricer. If you don't have a ricer, you can just use a masher. However, you're not going to get quite as smooth gnocchis in the end. Push that through your ricer directly onto a board, and then you're going to take 1 egg and you're going to beat it really well, only pouring in about half at a time. You're also going to add a couple of tablespoons of flour and start cutting that through. Now below there's going to be a recipe for the amounts that I had to use here, but please, you've got to use intuition with this one, because sometimes the potatoes have more moisture, your oven's hotter, the egg's bigger, there's lots of variables. So use the recipe down below as a guide. Once you've got the flour in there, fold it into a dough. You don't want to knead this for too long, 2 or 3 minutes max, until it's nice and smooth and one homogeneous dough. This is the texture you're looking for. So I've got probably too much floured bench, and we've got our lovely dough. Just make sure that's got lots of flour on it too. I'm gonna work in sections, cut out a log like that big, roll it out, nice and even. So you can use a gnocchi paddle to roll down and it puts the ridges on it. That's used mainly if you're doing it straight in sauce. We're gonna pan fry these gnocchi. I like them pan fried a bit better. I like the crispy edges. So we're just gonna leave them like that because it's gonna allow us to have more surface area to get nice and crispy. Onto a tray and repeat with everything. All right, now I've made an absolute mess. I'm gonna put these in the fridge just to rest for about 10 to 15 minutes before we blanch them. And I'm gonna clean up my bench. Big pot of rapidly boiling water. I'm gonna season it well with salt. We have our gnocchi. We're gonna carefully lower in. Once they float to the top, we can pull them out. Then we'll put them back onto an oiled tray and into the fridge immediately to cool down. You don't need to mix the actual gnocchi, but if you keep the water moving, that should stop them from sticking to the bottom. You also don't want to dump them all in at once because the big change in temperature will stop the water from boiling. One last swirl. Get the lid back on so it comes up to the boil again. So once they rise to the top, let them sit there for about a minute before you pull them out. Our duck is ready. That was going for about an hour and 45 minutes. Nice and low and slow. And you want it to be like, you want the meat to come off, but you don't want it to like disintegrate, if that makes sense. So pull the legs out, put them to the side. We're also gonna pull the hard herbs out. And we'll pull the meat off the legs. We'll mix it back through the sauce. We'll keep all that lovely veg in there. Should be a rosemary stalk in there somewhere. There it is. And look at our sauce and see how viscosic it is. We can definitely reduce that a little bit more. So get the heat on it and start reducing it down a bit. As we reduce, the water evaporates, makes things saltier. So keep tasting it because you don't want it to get too salty. So to pick our duck legs, you can let them cool completely, but I just use tongs. Now the skin, pull the skin off and then just pull that meat and in it goes. I don't want like shredded meat, I want like some bigger chunks. It is still gonna break down a little bit in the sauce as well. So pull the skin off first and then just pull the skin, put the skin on the board. We'll run our knife through that in a second. You don't want big pieces, you just want nice little pieces of skin, big pieces of flesh. Just be careful, on every duck leg, there's this one bone here. It's quite sharp. It can end up in the pot. Make sure that bone doesn't end up in the pot. You do not want to spend Valentine's evening at the A&E. That's not very romantic. See, that guy. You are bad news. I was running a restaurant in London many years ago called E&O, and we had a pretty famous duck salad on the menu there, like a duck and watermelon salad with toasted rice. Every now and then that bone would end up in someone's salad. It was always a stressful evening. Okay, stir that through. Try not to break up the duck too much. That's looking pretty good though. Pretty happy with how that is. We're gonna obviously need to heat this up again tomorrow on the night, so we don't need it to be perfect just yet. Back to our skin. So we're gonna chop that skin up. I just use one of my bench scrapers. In she goes. Right, I'm really happy with the consistency of that. I'm gonna turn the heat off. Let that come down to room temperature, put it in a container, in the fridge, ready for tomorrow. Tomorrow we just need to bake some bread really quickly. It's not a huge process. Plate our entree, finish our dessert, pan fry our gnocchi, and we're good. See you tomorrow afternoon. All right, it's Valentine's Day, so I celebrated the day with a shirt. It's not even Valentine's Day, it's a lie. I'm well before Valentine's Day. Anyway, I thought I'd be fancy and put a shirt on. We're gonna make focaccia first up. So we've got some it's a really easy dough to make, by the way. Plain flour, yeast, fresh yeast, and then just mix that so it's well incorporated. We will add some salt to this, but we'll wait until the yeast is distributed. Warm water. It's quite a high hydration dough as well. It's a no knead dough. It's like a stretch and fold type of dough. Pinch of salt, some olive oil. Mix that till it comes together. Start from the center and work your way out. And you could make this the day before if you wanted to, and then just like flash it through the oven. But it honestly doesn't take that long to make, and it's so much better fresh out the oven. All we're trying to do is just get the flour hydrated at this point. So just mix it until it comes together. We don't really need to knead it. We just need one homogeneous mass. I really like the word homogeneous. I use it a lot, don't I? Okay, so that's what we're looking for. A weird, shaggy looking dough. Cover with a tea towel. I'm gonna let it rest for 20 minutes. Go set the table while you got 20 minutes. So 20 minutes later, I've got a wet hand and some dough. So we just want to do what we call a stretch and fold. Scrape the sides down. It's really important that you got a wet hand, a really wet hand here, otherwise it's going to get sticky. Get underneath it, pull it up, flip it over. Underneath, flip it over. 2 more times. 1. When it starts to tear like it just did then, you know it's probably had as much stretching as it can take. Cover it back up, another 20 minutes. Been another 20 minutes, same thing as before. And you can see, look how much it's starting to rise already. Stretch and fold. Nice wet hand. Another 20 minutes. So we're ready to get into our tray. I like these cake tins here. You want something that is sealed, not like a spring bottom cake tin. Forever I was doing them in like cast irons, which works pretty well. The reason I like these nice thin ones is because they transfer heat really quickly, which means you kind of get better color on the bottom of your focaccia. So I'm just put a lot of oil in here, maybe 3 tablespoons, and I'm going to make sure it's completely covered the tin so that that will not impede the rising at all, if that makes sense. Dough's looking delightful. Okay, we're gonna put our dough in here. Wet both our hands. And we're just gonna stretch the dough out. You kind of want to overstretch it, because if you don't, it'll spring back. I like to flip it over so that it's got oil all over it. Cover that, we'll leave that to prove. You want it to double in size. Now we're gonna get ready with our apple tart tatin. So I pulled this out of the fridge like an hour ago. Let it get to room temperature. It's the one that we dealt with yesterday. I've got a sheet here of puff pastry that I've defrosted. You can make your own puff pastry, but honestly, I suggest you just buy it. I'm gonna carefully roll this out. Put this on the top. Just press it, which is just gonna give us an outline that we can then use to cut. Cut that out. We want a little bit of overhang, but not too much. There's our disc of pastry. So that goes over our apples, and then we tuck it in all the way around. And you want to make sure that you tuck in the ends right down the side so that it kind of cups around it a bit. Cut across in the top. That's going to let any steam escape. Then just a simple egg wash over the pastry so it gets nice color. And it might seem a little bit counterintuitive because we've just let the apples come to room temperature. So we're going to put this whole thing back in the fridge until we're ready to cook it. The reason we put it back in the fridge is because we want this pastry to stay nice and cold. The pastry will rise better if it's going in the oven cold, and the apples won't come down in temperature much in the time that it's in the oven, in the fridge. Sorry. So our dough's been rising for about just over an hour. It's doubled in size. It's got a decent amount of oil. I'm going to put a little bit more on top. Get some on my fingies. I'm going to put some dimples in there. Season it with some flaky sea salt. Then into a fan force oven, 220 degrees. I've got an oven tray in there upside down as well. That's absorbed some of the heat. It's also going to give us a nice kick to the bottom of the pan. I'm going to cook it till it's nice golden and almost dark on the top. I want good color on this. Probably going to take 25 to 30 minutes. Got a couple of peaches here. They're really in season at the moment and they're delicious. I will grill these if they're not quite perfect, if that makes sense. So if they're a little bit hard, I'd grill them. I think these are going to be fine to just have raw. Look at that. That's a pretty good looking peach. Pull that pip out, have a taste. Yeah, I think grilling it would be a crime. I'm gonna leave them as they are. We're just gonna cut them into nice wedges like that. I reckon we only need one as well. Into a bowl. Dress with a little bit of olive oil, just a little bit of salt. We got our hazelnuts that we toasted yesterday. Crush these a bit. That's plenty. So our table's set, our bread's in the oven, our entree's almost ready. We also are gonna get our tart tatin ready in the oven as well. So first up, the duck. We just need to gently heat this. We definitely don't need all of it. It's probably 4 portions there easy. So I'll take about half of it. We'll get that on a low flame, just heating up slowly. So our bread's almost ready. Take the ricotta, push it back a bit so you start with a nice smooth top, and then we go under it, and then put that on the plate with the smooth part at the top, and we'll have a big well in the center for our peaches. Hazelnuts, some balsamic vinegar for a bit of acid, then some mint, nasturtium leaves, just a little bit of olive oil to finish. Let's get our bread ready. Serve it this way up. There we go. Whipped ricotta, fresh peaches, hazelnuts, and fresh focaccia. First course done. All right, first course was a success. Now we're gonna do the main course, but before we do that, tart tatin goes in the oven. 180 degrees, it's gonna take about half an hour. Gnocchi time. So I got a big pan over like a medium heat. I'm gonna get a bit of olive oil in here. We're gonna get some good color on one side, flip them over, then we get good color on the other side. Make sure your oil's hot before you put your gnocchi in the pan, or they will stick. All right, I've got some color on a gnocchi. Gonna add a little bit of butter, a little season of salt. While that's foaming up, we'll get the duck plated. So our duck's nice and hot. This is not a traditional gnocchi dish before someone gets angry in the comments. We're not gonna toss it through the sauce. I'm gonna put our duck ragu on the bottom, and then we'll put our gnocchi on top. And all we need to do to finish it, some fresh pecorino. Just a touch of olive oil, because it's delicious. Duck ragu, pan-fried gnocchi. Dessert's in the oven. That'll be ready in about 20 minutes. We'll see you then. Whoa, look at that. Stunning. Make sure we're good. There's lots of caramel on this one because we had the double layer of apples, which is fine. Just need to be really careful when we turn it out because that caramel is going to be hot. And if you get it on yourself, it's going to hurt. Confident flip. Yum. Just need some ice cream on the top, and then I honestly would put that down in front of us. Actually a bit big for 2 people, but you know. That is delicious. Well, I don't know it's delicious, I'm assuming it's delicious. So there you go, entree, main, and dessert all cooked at home with lots of love and far better than going out to a restaurant on Valentine's night. Thank you, legends, so much for watching. Like this video if you took anything from it, subscribe if you're not, and we'll see you next week for another recipe. Peace.